that program, we also build on additional ways to engage residents, including having teams like you suggested. I think that's a great opportunity to engage residents that know what's happening in terms of single-use plastics and how they're reducing their ways of using plastics. So, I mean, all of that can be done. It's all creative opportunities, and anytime we have those ideas, bring them forward and find ways to engage.
Well, I'd like to see it happen sooner than that.
So we've started the first one with the strategic plan, community champions. That's 50 engaged staff that have signed, or sorry, residents that have signed up to be engaged. And we'll be asking them their area of focus, like they might be interested in environment, they might be interested in what's happening in terms of the downtown, or there's all kinds of issues that we hope that they could be identified, that we could use them for in terms of working teams, focus groups, different sessions. It's not going to be like, it's a fluid group. We don't intend to say we're going to meet every month. It's going to be based on what issues they would like to speak to.
So I'm talking specifically from the report in January, where we have community teams, like I said, and working groups, and that's not.
Sorry,
that's not really part of that.
What's that report? Sorry.
That report came in January to this council, 21st, 2019, and it was about changing the format, which is fine.
Of the advisory councils?
Yeah.
Oh, that's exactly what we're doing. So we're utilizing Sarah Moore, and we're creating this group.
So we have the watershed program coming in, our climate change, part of all of these environmental initiatives, and that's coming out in June. And then we also have flooding that is happening now, so lake levels, that kind of thing. So what I'm saying is, can we have a committee with people who have some background in that and interest in that, just to help us with some of that community engagement conversation around those issues?
And we're saying, and I'm saying through the chair, I'm saying yes, we can. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, everyone, for that. Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Cruciano. My only concern regarding the plan was just engaging our third-party vendors, and I was wondering if we can speed that up. So, for example, we've been to a few events at the G Center where they're still using styrofoam cups, like in 2019, and that's obviously cause for concern because obviously we'd like that kind of taken care of sooner than later. So, what was the rationale of kind of putting that out further in the future?
So through the chair, so the first focus of this plan is internally focused. So we have a limitation on we recognize our limitation of what we can ask third-party businesses in the community to do. But we can certainly, part of phase one is educating and having conversations with those. So when we do go to have events at a space, we say, at the town, this is what we do. So there is an element of public education that we can do as much as we can from an encouragement perspective. When we go into and there's a lot that we're kind of chunking into phase one around public education, around finding a vendor of record that can provide us with some green serviceware that we can sort of have at the town, all of our town facilities and events. But then moving into phase two is where we really take a holistic look at the vendors that we have and that we work with on a day-to-day basis. But we wanted to make sure that it had its own phase almost, and that there was a time where staff could really work with our existing contracts and do an analysis in each department to understand the capacity to comply for all of these. So in a case where we have a contract and there are sustainable options, so if I'm trying to think like a caterer, for example, if we can have the conversations with the caterers to say, we'd really like to see what you bring to the town, if you can bring it in a reusable Tupperware container that you can then take back with you, and really reduce your plastic, disposable plastic. That's a conversation where that party can realistically comply. But where we have sort of these nuances in different departments, so like operations or recreation, where there are needs that the federal ban hasn't really come into effect yet, and so they're not able to comply. We have a marker of that, and so I think from a third-party business perspective, we want to make sure that we're not forcing them to do anything beyond our control until the federal ban comes into place. However, staff absolutely intend to do all of the encouragement that we absolutely can as soon as council passes.
So using operations as the example then, we often go with the lowest tier bid. That's how we've always done it. Is there an opportunity to add a green component to the scoring that maybe will take the second lowest bid if they're greener than company one?
So through the chair, staff currently have a green procurement policy that is in place that takes into consideration sustainable options, but through conversations with finance, through this process of the development of the plan, when you have a policy like that in place, and feel free to hop in if I get this wrong, but my understanding is if we have a very prescriptive policy on only taking sustainable options, historically and from purchasing's experience, there are suppliers that will come back and say to the town, well, you have this policy in place, so you have to take this option that's sustainable, which in some cases may be more expensive and may not fit the specifications that we've outlined. So what staff are going to do as part of phase 2 in this review of all of our vendor relationships is look at strengthening the specifications writing that staff does, so that we're asking for these sustainable options and building in green opportunities, sort of at the outset of before it's handed off to purchasing for tender.
Okay, that's actually very helpful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Regional Councilor Crawford, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm not sure if you can answer this question or if it needs to be directed to Director Vaughn, but so when we're renting our facilities out, let's say ARC, MCC, anything that's happening at ACC, are we making the same requirements of people who are renting out? And if so, are we getting any pushback from that?
Through the chair, so initially we had kind of undertaken this exercise to understand what that could look like and if we could do that in a short period of time, which was requiring our sort of external patrons that are using our facilities. We heard some feedback that led to a conversation that we need to have some further study and analysis done on what that actually means and the impact it has on cost, and what are some of the options. Some of the options that were floated where staff require that those that come to the facilities can only use single-use plastics, that we provide them or we sell it to them at cost that what we source that we can then provide to them. There were conversations about asking people to take their waste with them when they leave, to divert it out of our waste. Already are paying for these spaces, and we want to make sure that we're not perceived as charging larger amounts of money than what we can. That we don't want to upset residents, and we don't want to have an impact on usage, and we also need to understand the resources for recreation facility staff of what that looks like to manage. So that's why we've kind of looked at that we've taken that out of this equation and are looking to do a more fulsome analysis of this. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to just undertake an education campaign, and that might take the form of something like a one-pager that gets attached to all of our facility booking that says, this is something that the town is doing, and in the face of the current climate that we're living in, these are some of the tangible steps the town has taken. These are some of our vendors that we use that would be considered compostable or sustainable alternatives. And just really keep that conversation going from an encouragement perspective until we're prepared and council's approved a plan for enforcement.
Yeah, and until you have the clout of the federal government, really you're kind of out there on your own, right? It makes it a lot less enforceable.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Cruciano. Thank you for the report. Just going over the key milestone tasks for phase 1. Implement the updated green event policy and corresponding guidelines with a focus on internal meetings and events. So this would be an internal meeting or event.
Mm-hmm.
Does that also apply to all of our town facilities and our permitted spaces?
Through the chair, if the town is holding an event in one of our owned or permitted spaces, then yes, it would.
Well, what about everybody else?
Everybody else
that uses our permitted space.
At this point, it would just be through the chair, it would just be an encouragement at this phase until we're able to understand what enforcement of that for external users would look like.
At what phase does that become mandatory for user groups?
Through the chair, so that becomes, there will be a staff report coming back to council by the fall of 2022, and it's expected that enforcement will begin within the following year, so by winter 2023.
And the third bullet, audit all meeting rooms and town-owned event facilities to ensure 3 stream receptacles are available for use. Great. I thought we'd already done that, but great. But the problem that I have with this is that all of our waste is considered ICI and it all goes to the same place. So we might separate paper and that now, but we're kind of just wasting time and money unless we start addressing where that goes once it leaves here. So where does that fall in this?
So through the chair, perhaps Director Bridgman can provide a bit of background onto where our how we divert our recycling versus the composting and black bag waste that we have for that.
Catherine?
So currently, through the chair to Mayor Collier, all of our waste is outsourced, except for the park facilities. That is taken care of by town staff. But we are in a contract for our facilities, and all of the waste is taken to the transfer station, the regional transfer station in Pickering, and disposed of there.
Right, so nothing is recycled.
The recycling is taken there, but no.
No, so that's where we have the breakdown in the system. We can do all of this, but it's just optics until we actually start addressing where it goes once it leaves here.
The recycling, we do have the two-stream. We have three-stream in all the facilities. We have the green waste. We're actually just working on the numbers of how much waste that we generate. So we're getting, what we're looking at is understanding what those counts look like. So we can get a better handle on what we're recycling versus what is in the black bag, what is in the green bin. So we are moving to more of that data analysis than we did before. So we can have a better understanding of what's being diverted versus what is going into landfill.
But as long as we're within this contract for our facilities, do we have any say as to what they do with the waste when it's taken away? Can we look at that contract and specify that no, this has to be recycled? Like if we're gonna collect the paper has to go to a recycling facility, not just the regular bin.
Yep.
We can do
We
that?
can absolutely look at that.
I think that really has to be part of this, because again, like, we want to be, what happens behind the scenes is as important as what happens up front when you see the bins, in my opinion. What do we do with all of our waste that's collected, like the leaves and that type of thing, our organics?
All of the
From
organics.
operations, so if staff are out raking leaves today, what gets done with those?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we don't rake leaves. We mulch them, and they
Okay.
stay in place. It's part of our planned healthcare, and then they decompose.
Okay. What about the stuff that comes from the street sweeper?
Street sweeping, under the contract, it goes to Miller Waste,
Okay.
because it's considered a
Hazardous?
hazard.
Okay. Shoot, this thing just turned off, 1 second. I was glad to see, thanks Catherine, I was glad to see in phase 2, the work with purchasing and each department to review all existing contracts and vendor relationships. You know, one of my pet peeves is those little individual creamers.
Yeah.
And when I find out that our contract is to provide those,
And-
that's something exactly that needs to be reviewed.
And through the chair, through our conversations with departments that we undertook, there was something revealed about that contract that depending on sort of the regional differences between composting facility capacity, those small creamers are compostable under the City of Toronto's compostable sort of rules, and so that was the reason, initially that was the understanding that, from my understanding, that staff had when the contract was entered into, that they were compostable. Moving forward though, you know, we've had some conversations about what that could change given that we don't have those compostable facilities here in Durham region, and what the alternative to those small creamers could be, so absolutely noted on the small coffee creamers.
Okay, just jumped out at me. I'm glad to see this come forward. I guess when we brought forward the motion, it was last year, asking staff to look at a plastic reduction strategy or plastic ban over long term. This is getting us on the way. I guess ultimately my vision is that, you know, you go into any town facility, you go rent an HMS Ajax room, you have to have organic disposable cups, you have to have bamboo cutlery, you have, like, I mean, but again, we have to make sure that that gets where it's to the proper organic facility as well. So it's a good first step. I'm looking forward to the next 2.5 years till it's fully implemented. And I do agree with what Council Lee said about having a scoring system when it comes to the more sustainable options. And I suggested that to the region too, only for the region it was more economic benefit to the region scoring. Because again, I think we do need to look, if we can, I don't know if legislation stops us, but if we can, look at the more, I guess if a company is bringing economic benefit, I'll use Gordon Food for example. That was the example I used at the region. Creating jobs and bringing economic benefit or environmental benefit, which, and I can't think of an example right now of something that could here, but I'm sure there are some examples.
And through the chair, absolutely, and that kind of extends to understanding our relationship with our vendors and making sure that staff, when they're requesting, when they're looking to enter into contracts, that they themselves, our sort of frontline staff, are thinking through what those sustainable options could be on the front end.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on 4.1?
I'll move it.
Thanks,
No,
but
no.
first, I'd like to commend Ms. Cristiano on taking the charge on this first of all, and the wealth of knowledge you've been able to acquire within the period of time you've been on staff. And you sound like our senior staff as well, so I really am impressed with the way you represented this motion. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
No, you're welcome.
Promotion.
So mover for this would be Mayor Collier. All in favor? Any opposed? This motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Cristiano. We now like to move on to 4.2, 2020 Council Member Remuneration, pulled by Regional Councillor Sterling.
So I had a motion about our compensation, I think late last year, or early this year, and I think this is the better forum to bring this up. And in terms of just the benefits of travel or the benefits of retirement benefits, is it possible to get a staff report outlining what the different municipalities do and where we align and don't align, and if there's any cost savings about perhaps changing one or the other? Like, does it require a motion from staff to ask for that, or from council?
If council wants to direct staff to reach out.
Okay. So can I now's the best time. Can I just amend the report then to just include asking staff to review not just core salary compensation, but also the travel allowance and retirement benefits, just a report for it, just so we can see firsthand the exact numbers and whether there's any potential cost savings. And if there's not, then I know, and we can use that going forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This was the conversation with owners that we had previously.
That's one example, but yes.
Were
But
there other things you wanted to?
well, I just ultimately like the travel allowance too. I saw that. I think Oshawa had a different travel allowance than us. They had a lump sum and then mileage.
Oh, I see. You
Whereas we
wanna
just
see-
so I just want to see like just on an average and aggregate whether we are in line, higher or lower.
So through the chair, the travel allowance for Oshawa, they don't have a specific travel allowance, they simply claim their mileage.
It says 52 more than last month.
If there's a savings, then yeah, we'd have to do that research, but yes, we could find it out.
Yes.
So that's the amendment. It's just asking if staff could report back on not core salary, because that's obviously averaged out, but the ancillary compensation that we receive to see if there's cost savings available.
Yes.
If I could just
Director.
clarify, is the intent that would hold up approval of this year's remuneration bylaw?
No,
Okay,
no,
just
definitely not. I
clarify.
just
For
for our
information.
information,
Okay.
possibly for next year, to look into possibly savings at that point.
Got it.
Thank you.
Hey,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Just to that, last year, Mary Lou, when you presented the same report near, I think it was October, you had outlined the comparison to a number of different things. Because I had asked you to look at not just the compensation, but also the whole package. You know, some municipalities have a enhanced medical, what's that called, where they have a separate Pickering, a healthcare spending account. Pickering has a $5,000 healthcare spending account. Some other municipalities have some slightly different things. I know in Oshawa, the Oshawa mayor used to be provided a car from GM, which is why they didn't have one.
Oh.
Now that's probably changed.
I
But
hope so.
again, there's different aspects of it, but I think we looked at a lot of those, but I think just to be clear, what you're looking for is a staff report that shows direct comparison between OMERS versus our 10%. Is that-
Everything as well, like the travel, like you know, we, this is a very high level report, I understand it
Mhm.
should be, but, I've never actually been given a full breakdown of what of what the big five municipalities do in terms of travel allowance, in terms of, retirement and ancillary, you know, health benefits and whatnot. So I just want a more fulsome picture, just so any recommendations can be made off, existing information.
Okay, so just a more comprehensive. One thing I would like to see is, because it becomes a little bit cloudy when I was doing my math on the OMERS, when there was talk about a motion on it. It depends on whether you're over or under the threshold. And once you're over the threshold, the amount changes. So I would like to see an exact dollar for dollar, you know, comparison of what it would be. But I think also through my research on that, there was a lot of ins and outs as far as who has to be enrolled in the program and that type of thing. So would you be able to get all that information together in one report?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to see that as well. Thank you.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Any other questions on 4.2?
I think the amendment has to be voted on first.
Okay, we have an amendment.
Yes, you have to vote
On
on
the
the
amendment.
amendment. And then the motion is-
What's the amendment?
The amendment is to include, that subsequent reports include a more comprehensive review, including things such as travel allowance, retirement benefits, and Councillor Lee, did you also want to include ancillary health expenses?
Yes, please, the full picture, if possible.
Okay, so.
If that's
just
possible,
read that?
that's not, yeah, okay.
Okay, that's it.
No, you have to call your vote.
Okay, so.
Any
those
questions
opposed?
on the amendment?
Any questions on the amendment? Yeah?
No.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries?
Now you do your main motion as amended.
So, what's the main motion as amended?
The main motion would be
Motion is
the
4.2.
motion within the report for 4.2, that the attached 2020 council remuneration bylaw be brought forward to the March 23rd council meeting for approval, and that in subsequent reports includes a more comprehensive review.
Okay. So I have to read that, or you all heard it?
We heard it.
Okay, there you go. All in
4.2 is
favor?
amended.
Any opposed? It's carried. It's good?
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
No problem.
I'll give you my voice next time. All right, so we will now move, so, okay. 4.3, pulled by Councillor Rob Tyler Moran, 2019 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses for Members of Council and Council appointees.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Acting Director of Finance, Sarong. I understand there's been updates to the information contained in the attachment. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Warren. We just received information from a lexicon that the remuneration for the board of directors, the numbers are not correct. They just only today just provided us updated numbers. So I would like to ask council to receive the report as information, and we will provide an updated report with the amended remuneration from a lexicon for the board of directors, and we'll also post that report on the website, the amended report.
Okay. I gotta get a motion to receive information. So can I have a motion to receive for information? All those in favor?
Who moved it?
Rob Tyler Moran, yeah, sorry. Yeah, those in favor? Any
Oh,
opposed?
this is Rob.
It's Rob, smooth. Okay. Done, no more questions, 4.3, thank you very much, Mr. Arrow. Okay, so Councillor, Regional Councillor Lee has retracted his.
No, I'll ask the question, actually, sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. On 4.9?
No, Mayor polls 4.8.
Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Read sweeping.
All right, you got it.
All right, my favorite.
Contract award.
There was a large discrepancy, through you to Ms. Bridgman, there's a large discrepancy between the first and second, almost 100%. Just, how can two be so far apart? I mean, I'm all for the lowest bid, but I just wanna make sure we're getting everything that we're asking for. I mean, that's a big difference.
Quadruple.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, the contract is 20 working days to do the work. They have to bring in as many street sweepers as required. The contract is paid by kilometer. It's a pretty straightforward contract. Alman has been our vendor of record for the last couple of years. But the pricing that we have budgeted for is the contract's $19,000 over at the $673,000. So we feel that it's an accurate representation of the value of the work required.
So 214, thank you for that, 214,000 per year.
Mhm.
That's 20 days, 21 days, you said?
That's 20, they have, within the contract, they have 20 days to complete the work.
Is that in like a spring and a fall?
Correct.
Okay, so they do two, is that 20 days in the spring, 20 days in the fall?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just wonder, what's the cost of a sweeper, approximately?
We have one road sweeper, and then we have a mini sweeper, so we augment the contracted services with our own forces from in-house. The cost of a sweeper, I would have to double check with Fleet, but I believe it's in the neighborhood of 200,000.
I'm just wondering, and I know you're gonna say we need more staff, but what the cost would be to have this as an in-house service. I see the CEO waving frantically.
Takes the floor.
Through you, Mr. Chair. To your first question, Mr. Mayor, the difference between how can the difference between the amounts be so high? It's the same with the third one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second company may have had to purchase the capital equipment, the street sweepers, to be able to actually bid on the tender. To your question about whether it's worthwhile to have this as an in-house service, there's not enough days that those sweepers would actually be put to use to make it worth the while to spend money on the capital. It's far, in my experience, having looked at this and analyzed it previously, you're far better just to contract.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. I'll move the report, Chair.
I just have one question.
There's just one question by Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. So I just saw in the background of the report that it's, the sweeper is April and November to complete the service in the south section of the town. So it's only done in the south, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, through the
Wait a
chair.
minute.
Hold on a second.
Sorry.
We got leads too.
No, the service, the contracted service is completed in the south, whereas in the north, it's completed by town staff.
There you go.
Thank you.
And we get 40 days.
So, and we are up to twice a year, but if there is a need, we increase the level of service wherever we need to. So the service is completed throughout town.
Thank you very much.
Any more questions on 4.8?
Get on that, so you want to take my Corvette out.
4.8 moved by Mayor Collier. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.9, 2019 year-end building permit activity and 2020 projection report pulled by Regional Councillor Sterling.
I'm not sure who to direct this question
We'll go to
to. Yeah. Is the reason it was such a significant drop-off over the past 5 years, which is our lowest in 5 years, is it due to Bill 108? Is there any specific reasons that we can glean from this information?
Through the chair to Council, the sort of point address that to Steph, I think is one of the contributing factors. We're really not sure at this point. There's some projects that I believe could be a financial reason why they're not going forward, or it's really.
I just heard ultimately rumors that a lot of developers wanted these new rules in place before they put through their permits, and just wanted to know if you can validate that.
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, that is our assumption, because it has been fairly steady in terms of building permit activity over the past few years, and then a steep drop in 2019, and with the uncertainty of in 2019 over what the impacts of Bill 108 would be, that some developers have speculated and just waited to see if they could benefit from whatever came out of Bill 108. Although to Mr. McReelis, some of the stalls are also inability to secure financing.
Great. I just kind of want to put that on the record because, it is a significant drop-off, but it's no lack of effort of our, planners, our ID, our council, so I just wanted to, kind of validate that. So, thank you, Chair. I'll move
You're
forward.
welcome. Yeah, moved by, any other questions? Mayor Collier, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just wondering, because I have some pretty impressive stats the planning's provided to me of the number of applications that we have in the works today. But those don't actually have permits issued.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we have a significant number of applications just sitting in limbo, waiting for planning approvals for whatever reason, like we just discussed. But yeah, if you were to come by to my office and see all the plans just sitting there and waiting to be issued, it's not just the low numbers in the report are not reflective of the activity that we've actually
That's my next question. Based on what you know, I'm guessing we're gonna be way, way over for next year.
Oh, correct, and we're already seeing that in the first 2 months of this year, they're up over 19.
So I just want everybody to be aware, don't be,
Yes.
This isn't a downer. This is a putting everything in place year. And the numbers that you see when we see this report next year are gonna be very, very different and very, very impressive.
Read my mind.
Yeah.
Any other questions? 4.9, moved by Mayor Collier. Those in favor?
I thought Sterling would.
Oh, sorry, that was moved by Councillor.
Can we strike that from the record, please, and not? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yes. Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.10, Pickering Village Community Improvement Plan, 2019 Facade Improvement Grant and Signed Grant Program Summary. Pulled by Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, does the budget for this still have to be 75,000? As it seems we've only kind of come close to that once, and if not, like, we could possibly reallocate that budget to other capital projects that need it, and then actually use it. So is there an opportunity for that? Like, in your estimation, do you honestly think we should keep this budget at 75,000? Or 75,000?
So through the chair, personally, I think there is the value there. I think the projects do exist. Early in every year, we get quite a few inquiries about this program, and it's just so happened over the last few years that some of the larger projects haven't come through. So this year, we haven't even done the full evaluation of the projects, and we have $30,000 worth of grants already, and I expect that to go up. So it's one of those cases where I know there is a significant amount of money that can be spent. It's just getting the property owners on board and getting them to come in the proper time to do the work as well.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Sawchuk. We're currently undergoing a review of the CIP in our downtown. Is that same review being done for Pickering Village?
Through the chair, at this point, it's not.
Okay, is that something that you foresee? I mean, has there been anybody outside of facade improvements taking advantage of any of the CIP benefits like development charges? For instance, the development of Clark's garage at the corner there.
Yeah.
Would that be subject to reductions of development charges and planning fees?
It would be, yes. So I'd say there are two big projects that have really looked to the CIP so far for incentives. One being 599 Kingston Road West, which is right at the corner, as you mentioned, and then the other one was 113 Old Kingston, which was at the sort of western limits on the vacant parcel beside the
the Pav lands?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So those are the two big projects so far, and we just we were fairly far along with 599 Kingston Road West, and recently they sort of reevaluated and realized that they were leaving some incentives on the table due to the nature of their application. So they've made some modifications to try to fully take advantage of what's out there. But those are really the two large projects in Pickering Village, and due to the nature of development in that area and the vacant lands that are available, there is somewhat of a limitation on the number of projects that we could foresee in the future for these large incentive programs.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, can you monetize what those benefits are? You probably don't have the information with you, but can you just report back to Council at a future GGC on exactly what the CIP in Pickering Village has cost per project, so we get an idea? I know it's a much smaller scale than Medallion, for instance.
Right.
So it won't be as big dollars, but I would like to know sort of what the cost is of that CIP.
Sure. and through the chair, just to follow up briefly, at this point, for the big redevelopment incentive programs, there's been $0 claimed through the Pickering Village CIP. I'd say the largest program when you're looking at financial incentives is the tax Rehabilitation Program, and that actually requires council approval for any applications that come in. So when they do come in, we require a business case that will illustrate the type of incentives and the actual the money that we would be paying out through that program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Regional Councilor Dice, please.
Thank you. So in your report, and thank you for that, pictures were great to see what a difference it makes in those buildings and into the streetscape really of the village. So there were a couple of grants that were given out that weren't completed prior to the programs closed because of the early start of the winter, so they weren't able to fully recoup some of the grant money. Something we never thought about before. We didn't anticipate that happening. So we're going to look at that and how we can anticipate that in the future, or are there guidelines we need to put in place again to say you really need to start earlier?
So through the chair, it's a bit of a difficult one because one of the projects last year, for example, came in and got their approvals in March and didn't get started on the work until late October. And it seems to be sort of the nature of some property owners. Just hold on as long as possible before having to bring in the contractors and pay out for the work. There may be ways to sort of incentivize people getting in quicker and earlier. And largely in the past, I think the limitations on the money available did exactly that. People knew there was an allocated fund of money, and if they weren't one of the first to the table, they might lose their opportunity. I think they've recognized over the last couple of years that the applications have been down, and that's made them think they can wait a little longer. But we can see what we can do to try to get those projects on board earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report and the pictures. I agree. It's always great to see it. So I know that the downtown CIP is currently under review. I'm just stating this as I've stated in the past. I would love to see something available like the facade improvement grant or sign grant program. I know that downtown and Pickering Village are completely different, but they certainly could use that incentive or that help. So as Regional Councillor Lee mentioned, if $75,000 is not being spent fully over there, send some down to downtown CRP. I would love to see that. So I'm just stating it. I did ask previously, and I just wanted to put that reminder out there. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Are there any questions on 4.10?
I had my hand up.
Yes, he did. Now calling Councillor RTM.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Senior Planner Michael Sawchuk. You mentioned an address to Mayor Collier. Could you repeat that? Was it 465?
So through the chair, I believe the first address we were speaking about was 599 Kingston Road West.
599 Kingston Road West.
Yeah, so that's right at the southeast corner of Kingston Road and Church Street.
Yeah, and can you just repeat, sorry, just briefly what you spoke about that? And you were saying that they're...
So they have an application in with the town. It's a site plan application. They were proposing to build a 4-story mixed-use building right at the corner. Because they weren't doing underground parking, they were not taking full advantage of the redevelopment programs we have available. So now they've gone back, proposed putting in underground parking, and as a result, increasing the height of the building a bit and just looking to accommodate more units, I guess, to make the case for underground parking more economically feasible for them.
Okay, and can you speak to the timeline of that project? Sounds like it's very
It's a
early.
difficult one. It's been ongoing since 2017, and so we've been working about 3 years, or actually 2016, I believe. So 3 or 4 years we've been working to get it to where it is right now. And as I've said, with this sort of large-scale change to the plans, that's going to require that we go back and sort of reevaluate all the studies and all the drawings that have been provided to us so far. But I know they are eager to sort of make way and make progress on this project. So I know that they want to get this thing built as soon as possible. They're thinking in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senior Planner Shachak. Yes,
Nope. No,
no?
just moving.
Oh, okay. I have a quick question. How many units are we looking at?
They originally proposed 60, and now they're proposing 100.
Okay.
How many stories is that?
That would be 6 stories. So the building would be 4 stories at the front, and then step back slightly for the upper 2 stories.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so that's moved by Regional Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any opposed? Carries. You have a question there?
On parking.
On parking. Do you want to ask that now?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move on to discussions. Occasional use parking permits.
So we finished our 1-year trial period on our occasional use parking permitting system. I'll just recap quickly for some of the councilors that weren't around back in 2017, but staff were requested to set up an occasional use parking permitting system to include anyone using the system with free permits up to 12 a year per license plate on a 24-hour constant parking basis. That they would not be valid during winter control events when plows or snow issues are out on the road, and that to ensure that whatever system we put in place, all other parking provisions were still in place during that time. In January 2019, we launched the 1-year pilot program. Not only did we meet all of Council's requested parameters, but we also developed a system that was ability for the residents to apply for those permits online, to do multiple permits in days at one time if they had family coming, that they didn't have to keep going in. We developed a system that was permitless, so they didn't have to hang anything in the window of their car. They were attached electronically to the vehicle that we could test with or use with our handheld equipment to verify whether permits were in place. And the availability to deactivate the system at any time that there was an inclement weather event coming forward, either in advance or currently. And to send out notification to those users that their permits have been revoked. The program concluded at the end of 2019. We issued approximately 9,400 or 9,500 permits. Over 226,000 hours were used for hours of free parking on our streets. 3,600 participants participated in the program on individual plates. That averaged out to about 2.6 permits per license plate per vehicle that utilized the system. Out of those plates, only 133 were out of province, and that the portal was closed down for 15 days throughout the year due to inclement weather, revoking about 85 street permits. Some areas of concern that were identified during the 1-year pilot is that the program was intended to be set up for occasional use for friends and family and for residents that were having work done on their properties to be able to park with relief out on the streets. In reviewing the raw data of the permitting system, it's clear while many people did participate in the program, many users applied their maximum 12 to not just one plate at an address, but several plates. Looking through the raw data, we could see that. That was never the intent of that system. And we've already seen that for the first 2 months of 2020, the use of the permit system have already doubled to what it was this time last year. And that we can see, looking at the raw data again, that many of those users are maximizing their 12 permits per year already, and we're just heading into our 3rd month now. Moving forward, staff believe that the occasional use parking permitting system was a success. We believe that it should become a permanent temporary use parking permitting system. But we do believe that the system needs to be tweaked a little bit. We believe that the 12 free permits per license plate need to be lowered down to 5 permits per license plate. But we also acknowledge that the system in itself has occasions where people may need to get more permits. So we're also recommending that council endorse a provision fee that says after an individual has used their 5 free permits, that we also introduce a payment system for the next 12 permits, that they would be able to take out 12 additional permits at $12 per permit. on top of that, which would now give residents and visitors an opportunity of 17 permits, but 12 of those would be for pay. We think that the revenue would be between $10,000 and $15,000 would help offset the cost of the program. While there's several more complex issues that we're dealing with over issues that were caused in enforcement strategies and other items, we believe that those items will be dealt with and discussed in depth in June when we bring forward our new traffic bylaw. And that will deal with a lot of how we go about issuing tickets and proactive versus responding to complaints. So those issues will be dealt with come June. And that's an overview, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hannon. Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Mr. Hannon. Thank you for the report. Very happy to see this coming forward. How is it enforced? Like, I mean, if you issue these permits, these staff go on the street and go, okay, that guy's got a permit, we don't take it down, but these other 4.
So through the chair, as a direction to council originally that we were not going to be increasing any type of enforcement activities at the time that we introduced the free system. Our electronic handhelds allow us that as soon as we key in a plate number to our handheld, so a complaint has brought us to that street, as soon as we key in a plate number, it'll tell us right away whether a permit's been issued or not, and we move on to the next vehicle.
Okay. Here's my concern or issue with this, and I'm all for allowing some relief to parking, but as your report said, and as you said, you know, exactly what we thought was going to happen happened. The people that have just too many cars are kind of taking advantage, and that's not what the system was originally designed for. But given that, I mean, if people are willing to pay to park on the street, I mean, look at Toronto. Toronto makes probably tens of millions of dollars and trust me, I've parked there, and the one day you don't get a permit, you get a ticket for sure. Yeah, it's $40 for a $10 or $11 thing. I think we need to have this actively enforced, and you didn't have a budget item in here, and the clerk and I have had this conversation. I think it's only fair if we're going to allow, if some people are going to follow the rules and get a permit, and especially pay for their permit, we need to be actively enforcing those that don't, because otherwise it's not fair, in my opinion. So I would like to know what it would cost to have a full-time, maybe we have it, I don't know, but a full-time person whose sole job is to just go around and just enforce our parking bylaw. Do you know that number, or would that be difficult to get?
I don't know the number completely offhand, but through the chair, this is an issue that we have been starting to deal with and we're already working towards. We will have all those answers and a recommendation on how we're going to deal with the proactive. We're going to change some enforcement strategies that we're doing with council's endorsement come June when we bring forward the new traffic bylaw.
Okay, I don't mind, you know, in this case, if there is a staff request, because it will pay for itself. Like this, what we have to recognize is there is staff time required for this, and we need to recoup those costs. So it is a level of service increase, and we need to recoup those costs. So that's the only thing I see missing from this. And I agree with what you said about getting away from the complaint-driven system. I don't think that that's going to work with this. I think if we're going to go with a permitted system, then we can no longer do the complaint-driven. We need to be inactively enforced. So that's my comments on it. When does this start?
So through the chair, we would have to solicit our web developer that we deal with through our parking management system. We're gonna guess it should be ready to go within the next 2 or 3 months. So come June, it all falls into play pretty much the same time.
What I mean is, we're allowing, say this gets approved today, assume it will, and we allow 17, but somebody, by the time you get the system in place, has already used 10. Right? Are you going to start charging them after 5 if they haven't used 5 so far?
So for the first year, we're going to go some form of prorated, and we'll update council when we're ready to go live on the paid system on what we're going to do if we're going to institute it into the middle of the year, how we're going to compensate for the remainder of the year.
Well, I guess if the paid system starts June 1st, just for a number, and somebody's already used 17.
well, the most somebody would have is 12 up to that
Okay,
point.
use
They
12.
would be opted another 5 that they could pay.
Okay, so we're not on a calendar year right now, we're on a fiscal year, whatever you want to call it.
We're on the calendar year, June the permits start in January and they end in December, but what we would look at saying is that if we were gonna come in with the new system, for the remainder of this year, we may have to say it's 12 free until December, but then you would pay for any more over and above that you require.
Okay.
And we'll communicate all that out effectively in here, we'll bring in communications to deal with that communications plan through that system, and the rollout of the new traffic bylaw as well if council endorses.
Will this come back to council before, like, once that work is done, especially with the cost for what a dedicated enforcement?
That'll all come forward in June with the new traffic bylaw, yes.
Okay. I saw a hand over here.
Director Cooper?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on your question regarding proactive versus reactive enforcement, just if it helps for clarity. So I just want to ask Derek in a second to speak about our status quo in terms of complaint-based versus proactive enforcement, because I don't want council to be under the impression that we only do complaint-based enforcement. There are certainly some proactive elements to our parking program, but I hear your point that council or some councils may feel that the proactive piece is insufficient. So the introduction of this program has had some impacts on how much proactive enforcement we can do. In some ways, it's taken away from our ability to do as much proactive enforcement as we'd like to, because we're chasing essentially complaints that arise from the permit system. So Derek has been doing a lot of data crunching, and we're looking at ways that we can change our enforcement practices to try and get back to more of that proactive enforcement. Some regulatory changes and just some operational changes. So those are complex. They're going to be coming forward in June, as Derek indicated, as part of the traffic bylaw updates. And at that time, so we'll give you a clear picture at that time, with these changed practices, here's the amount of proactive enforcement that we can do. And if you're looking for an increased level of service beyond that, these are the staff hours that it would require, and this would be the cost.
Good.
So I understand your question on that, and we're going to bring that forward as part of that report. It was just, we're looking at things like the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Should that be 2 a.m. to 5 a.m.? And they're complex changes, and we just didn't have time to do them justice within this report, but we will address them before the summer recess for sure.
Okay. And when I say proactive, I mean you're out enforcing parking, what you see an illegal sign, you pick it up. That's not somebody else's job that's on sign pickup. That's what I mean by proactive as well, is not just one, but looking at a number of these different areas. And then I know operations is litter, but if it was me and I jumped out to pick up a sign, I'd grab a piece of litter there too, probably. But again, that's sort of where I want to be going towards.
Sure.
It's just the more proactive approach on many levels.
Okay, so Derek, can you just say a couple words about what our proactive program looks like?
Outside of anything that we deem to be a life safety issue, parking left wheels to curb, fire hydrants, no parking, no stopping, as an officer's going by to do a pool inspection, they will stop and deal with all those issues proactively. We will not wait for complaints, parked over a sidewalk, whatever the case. Between November and March, the end of March, we proactively enforce every street at 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. and we circle around the town. We usually do between 8 and 15 completions a year. Proactively, we hit every street equally in the entire town. While there's no cost associated with the permitting system, because we're still keeping our same levels of service responding to complaints, what we have noticed is our complaints for 2019 went up 30%. Traditionally, it goes up 5% a year. The residents, and even some exchanges that I received today from counselors who have resident emails that are extremely unhappy about getting ticketing. Unfortunately, the result is more people are complaining. Complaints cut into our ability to just drive around the town at 3 a.m. and ticket everybody. Now we have to drive past streets to get to areas to respond to those complaints to meet the levels of service that we've identified with council. Now we're meeting those levels of service, but where we're losing is that proactive ability, and that's what we're looking to compensate and come out with solutions in June to get council's endorsement to change how we've been doing business for 30 years to meet today's standards.
Okay, I have a couple more questions now. How long would the cycle be for staff or bylaw staff to basically do every street in the town? Is Is that, would they be able to do that once a week, once every 2 weeks?
So we would have to base that on, we would give several scenarios based on a staffing model on what it would take for 5 days, 10 days, 15 days. We did that a few years ago. There's a lot more streets in Ajax, but it was almost an increase of 7 full-time staff, vehicles, the works. To put staff on the road, we need equipment, vehicles, staff, so it can be fairly in-depth, but we'll look at several different models that we'll bring forward.
What I'm wondering is if it were, say, a 4-day or 5-day cycle, just picking a number for a couple of guys driving around and that's their sole job is just drive around the streets enforcing parking, would we still need the complaint-driven method if that route was often enough that it just did the job anyway and people just weren't parking because they knew they were going to get caught every 3 days?
Through the chair, with the residents I've come to know in 30 years, my answer would be no, it wouldn't be so.
Okay.
We could say to them, we don't accept complaints during midnight hours because we do have a proactive force. But if that's council's direction to staff, we would be more than happy to tell the residents that we're not responding to complaints. But that's something council would then be dealing with those residents that were unhappy if we weren't responding.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Regional Councilor Lee.
Through the chair to Derek, the program as it stands right now, like I'm talking about the online kind of application. I assume we'll be using a version of that the next iteration, correct?
Correct.
And you're confirming it's by license plate?
Correct.
So I did a test because I filled one out for my sister-in-law last week. And is it possible that it's done by the computer and via cookies being tracked? Because I put in a fictitious license plate hypothetically and it said I only had 11 permits left.
Correct.
But that shouldn't be the case if I use a fake name, fake address. Like, do you get my point?
Yeah, through the chair. So to understand the system completely, if you put in ABC 123,
Yes.
We're driving to the street tonight, and when I key in that plate number, if it has a permit, it tells me. If that plate doesn't exist, that individual will get a ticket.
No, sorry. Mine's on the other side. Of just like it tells me how many permits I have left.
Correct.
Right. It should be like going 12 and going downwards. It says I have 11 left with a made-up plate though, so that shouldn't be the.
So the plate permit is attached electronically to that license plate. If the plate doesn't exist, then the permit's not real, and we would never know.
So we have something checking all the plates, like all the
When we
active
go
plates.
onto a street, the minute we key in a plate, it'll tell us if a permit's been issued to that plate. If somebody's made
Got
up a
it.
plate, we wouldn't be able to find it because it's made up.
Okay. Yeah, okay. And based on your numbers, you said you had a lot of people max out their existing 12.
Correct.
Do you have that number exactly? Like how many people?
I don't have it exactly.
You remember
What we've
approximately?
had to do is we've had to match it up by email addresses to find out.
Right.
Because we don't track, because right now it's the resident's responsibility to find a legal parking spot, so they're not even logged to streets. Somebody
Right.
may have to park 3 streets away, depending if their whole street's no parking, they may have to park 3 streets away.
And I guess my last question is have we ever entertained an option of like an interactive map that shows where parking is not available? Because a lot of times, a sign may be stolen, which I wouldn't know of as a resident. So like somewhere I can just check very similar to where I'm applying for, where I can see on a map where I can apply.
Through the chair, so with the new traffic bylaw, that's something we can talk about. We're looking at developing, we already have internal map viewer layers that we can look at. Whether or not they can be open to public, that's something we'd have to go through IT to look at that. But to be clear, I heard the question this morning as well. In order for us to issue a ticket in a no parking area, if the resident can't see the sign, neither could we, and one of our requirements is we have to see the beginning and the end, so there's always a fail check there for us anyways.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
You are welcome. Thank you. Regional Councilor Crawford.
My question is, how do we deal with individuals who pay for, after their 5 free ones, pay for parking, but it's during a winter control time when, they paid for it prior to the winter control being activated, and it becomes no longer relevant?
So through the chair, we have the ability, all online payments would be through credit cards. We have the ability to instantly roll that back. So if we were to revoke the permits, the payments would go back on that credit card.
So it's not a save or anything, they just get refunded
It would
automatically?
be refunded directly
Okay.
electronically.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Tyler Moore.
Most of my questions have been answered, but through you to the chair. Just want to say thanks to your department for always dealing with this. I don't think I've called anybody more than you. I look forward to the new traffic bylaw coming in June 2020, and I gather from your comments you'll be inputting all the information that you've gotten from us and all your experiences. So just a statement, but you know, the hanging out, we always hear about cars hanging out into the street, covering driveways, the habitual overnight parking. You know, I don't know if there's any answers to these things, but hopefully, you know, we'll be a little closer. I don't know if you want to speak to any of those.
Just through the chair, that it's not just the bylaw side, so the traffic division has worked very closely, and they will be through all the public engagement that we're doing over the next few months and bringing the report forward. It will be us and traffic as well, and we've identified offenses instead of anyone hanging into the roadway. Those new offenses will include being beyond the front facing of a curb. So we've recognized things that have become an issue today that we're looking to deal with.
It's a difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you for your report. Just want to clarify, the 15 days that the portal was down, was that all due to winter weather?
Through the chair, absolutely.
No. So when you talk to the residents who are getting these occasional permits, do we talk like municipal speak, winter control events? Because I think there's some confusion as to when we can.
So through the chair, they have to check a box on the actual permitting system that clearly says during any snow event, is what it says, that all permits will be revoked. And then we personally send every resident who has a permit. And if they have 12 permits out to 12 different vehicles, they get 12 emails that says that due to the weather outside right now, we have revoked all permits and that the portal is closed for the time being.
I think some people aren't applying for a permit in the wintertime because they think that qualifies for winter control events. That's all I need. So there are residents that did need it, but didn't apply because they understood that condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions on 5.1? Yes, Councillor Bauer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, there. It's good to see that it's successful and that people are using it and that we're finding out some of the ways that we didn't plan for people to use, but they are. So I just had a question about the fee, and I think you know, it's reasonable to charge a fee. But so my understanding is we have more cars than we have legal parking spaces. So I think we talked about a fee may not work because if I don't have anywhere to park it and I'm paying for this fee, or I park somewhere that's illegal that it's just in front of my house and I parked there before, but technically it's an illegal parking spot. So I just wanna maybe ask you, are you making sure all residents know exactly what's the legal parking space, or maybe you can just talk to me about that.
Through the chair. So we have been very, very clear that anything that we've approved is something that we call a temporary use parking permit. Even now, even with a paid system, it's still temporary use. No one has any guaranteed parking. If it means they have to park 3 streets away from where they want to go, then they have to park 3 streets away from where they want to go. The same stipulations that exist now, whether they're paying for them or whether they're free, it still applies. That the onus is on the user to find a legal parking space. When we talk about guaranteeing people parking, and that's more of a permanent parking solution where we're giving out permits per month, and that's not what we're proposing now. That's where we need to count the amount of vehicles that are on the street. There's an expectation that if somebody lives on the street and they're applying for a permanent parking solution, then they should be able to get to park on their street. This one is the fact that if you have lots of friends and family that come visit, well then they have more access to take out parking permits, but they have to pay after 5. It's still a temporary solution, not a permanent.
And so the system itself, when a resident signs on to purchase one, that is all clearly, I haven't done it, so is everything laid out so we don't get phone calls saying, I bought 10 of them and I can't park anywhere, or if I'm paying for it, I'm paying for parking?
So they buy them per day whenever they need them, and it would go that they log in and it would give them their 5 free. After the 5th and they log in, it would say now you're going to be redirected to the site that you have to pay for. And it would be the exact same system of enforcement that we would have now. That we key in the plate and we would know that a permit's been issued to that car. And it tells them clearly, not just on the website, but they get a confirmation email that says, you must find appropriate legal parking.
Thank you, that's, I think the messaging that needs to be.
If there's, I'll move it if there's no.
No,
Thank you,
there's-
I'm finished.
Oh, great. We have another question from, which
It
comes.
was my question.
The mayor has a question. Yeah.
I just wonder, we have this great app, AppJacks. Will it be integrated into that as well?
Yeah, so my understanding now, we can continue the discussions, but we have to use our own vendor for the parking permitting system, and they don't communicate right now. We can ask for that to happen, but right now, that's not the case.
Thanks.
Any other-
So is that just that's dead, or is that something you might be
We
coming
can
back with?
continue to ask the developer, but, I mean, it's gonna be a fee involved in changing how AppJacks operates. It has to create a link to the back door of the payment system.
Okay, thank you.
Director Cooper, like, make some comments?
I was just gonna say, Mayor Collier, that is a perfect lead-in to our next topic, which is the IT strategy, which talks about a lot of integration gaps that we have. So one of the things
I
that,
segue well.
Yes, it's a perfect segue. Yeah, so just to elaborate on what Derek said, anything is possible, integrations are possible. How do we lay the groundwork for that?
I guess
So-
determines what determines it is what that cost is.
Sure, yeah.
If it's $1,000, let's do it. If it's 50, let's not.
$1,001.
If it's 1,001, let's not.
That's it, everyone?
Good, move it.
Thank you, Manager of Bylaw Services, Mr. Hannan. Great job. Moved by Councillor Tyler Morin. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now moving into presentations. We have a presentation on, drum roll, Corporate Information Technology Strategic Plan by Director Nicole Cooper and Susan Chase, consultant from the Perry Group. Welcome.
Through the chair, are questions to be asked as we go or before, at the end?
I think, how long, can we do it as we go? What would be preferable? Because it's quite the presentation, isn't it?
Pardon me?
It's quite the presentation. How long will it take?
It will be longer than 5 minutes, yes.
Okay, so can we wait until the end? Sure. It's only 5 minutes.
Oh, and then I guess, to the.
Oh, no, sorry, I said it'll be longer than 5 minutes.
Longer than
We're
5
certainly
minutes.
comfortable taking questions as we go.
Okay, wonderful.
If it's regarding the closed session part of this, then ultimately, I should save the questions for closed session, correct? So anything regarding staffing and costs should be saved for closed session. Great, thank you, thank you.
Do I have to present them to ask questions? General, or they can just-
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Okay, so I just go ahead and ask, you don't have to
Yep.
go through me.
Unless it's closed session.
You got it, unless it's closed session. Thank you.
So I'd just like to make some opening remarks, if that's okay. Try and keep them short.
Thank you.
So first I'd like to just welcome Susan Chase from the Perry Group. She's been the lead consultant on this project. And we've been working very closely together for over a year now. So what you'll hear today is the culmination of about a year's work. And it's really been a deep dive by Susan and her team into looking at the current state of our technology environment. So everything from our physical infrastructure to our application architecture, the structure of our teams. There was surveys conducted and focus groups and interviews with staff at all levels and members of council as well, I believe. And then a number of pretty intense sessions with the senior management team. So what you're gonna see in here today and the recommendations that the Perry Group is making really arise from two places. So the first is what I would say is like a really intensely well-informed understanding of the circumstances and conditions that are really unique and specific to Ajax. And then the second is Susan's broad familiarity and experience across the municipal landscape. So the Perry Group has done IT strategies for many municipalities, many that are comparably sized to us. And I think you'll find they have a real obvious expertise in what works and what doesn't, and how we need to position ourselves to be successful. So the first major deliverable that Susan and her group worked on was a key findings report, which outlined our current state of affairs and really pointed to some of the key areas that require attention. And that was reviewed at a staff level, but the final deliverable and what you'll see today is the strategic plan. And so that will touch a little bit on some of those key findings, but it's really about how we move forward. Where do we go from here? And just on that note, I think others will be really excited about what the future holds. With Susan's guidance through the last year, we've already accomplished a whole lot. We're moving in the right direction. It's certainly clear to me that everyone, including the IT services group and senior management, are ready for change and are really committed to moving us in a new direction when it comes to how we deal with technology. So just in case I don't get a chance at the end, I just had a couple thank yous I wanted to make. I just wanted to thank all staff who contributed to the plan, particularly Mary Lou, who spent many hours with me working through the complexities of the organizational changes that we'd like to make, which you'll hear about in the closed session. I just want to thank Susan, who's one of the most, probably the most dedicated consultant that I've ever worked with. Genuinely cares about Ajax and our future success, and I think you'll get that feeling as she gets going, if I ever let her talk. I want to thank the senior management group. Their engagement and support has really exceeded all my expectations, and I think Susan's commented from time to time that she's found the senior management group here to be one of the most engaged that she's ever worked with, so I just wanted to thank my peers. And Counsel for firstly agreeing to fund the development of this plan, but just more generally for your clear interest in technology and your recognition of how important it is to our business. When you look at our corporate strategic plan, like themes of technology and innovation are peppered throughout the whole plan. You're out in the community talking about technology and innovation, and I think that leadership is going to be what's really key in terms of us delivering on this strategy. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and I will pass you over to Susan.
Great. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for giving me the time today to do this presentation. It truly is my pleasure to be here. I do absolutely care about Ajax. I care about all of our clients, but I live in Durham region as well, so Ajax does have a little special place there. Over the next few minutes, I am going to give you a really high-level summary of the findings and some of the recommendations that we're making in the strategic plan. It's going to be quick. There's a lot of information that's been gathered, as you've seen from the full report. As the council was suggesting, please ask questions as we go along. It's probably easier that way than waiting until the end.
Did you hear that? We can ask questions as she goes on.
There. I just use the arrows. Yeah, it's good fun. I must have the magic touch, I guess. So there's a lot of talk these days about smart cities, IoT, Internet of Things, digital transformations. We're really hoping, and it's my goal, that this plan is going to help position the town to get you there in a planned and sustainable way. We don't want just to do a whole bunch of wonderful gadgets and bells and whistles without it being something that's meaningful to the town. So, why do a plan? These were some of the areas that we identified that was very important to the town. There's opportunities available right now for improvements to some of the existing processes and practices for increased efficiencies. We know that. There still is, we want to reduce the papers. There's still an awful lot of manual processes in place. How can we use technology to improve things? The growth of this community is definitely a driver. One just needs to drive through Ajax and see how much it's changing over these few years. This growth has caused an increased complexity of the service delivery as well, requiring more collaboration through staff and the coordination between the departments. No longer can the single department deliver everything that's needed. There's a lot of pressures on core services to assist with the efficient operations. And that's as well managing the workforce. The people here, the staff, they have different expectations and requirements to be able to deliver all the services to meet the pressures that are on them. And then of course the customer's expectations are really changing. Get into that in the next slide a little bit more, but we really need, as the local government, to really support that no wrong door approach to service delivery. We can't just do it our own way anymore. That's changed. So speaking of that, certainly we've seen a lot of major changes brought on by the internet, smartphones, Google, Netflix, Amazon. A week doesn't go by that we don't hear of another bricks and mortar business shutting down or dramatically changing because of the impact of technology on their way of doing business. All of these they deliver services in a way that's easy to use. It's intuitive. Any one of us can pick up or go into any one of these apps and figure out how to work it. It's available anywhere. It's available anytime, 24/7. And the reach of impact has really been felt throughout not only the service industry, but now the expectations are on government as well. All as well, banks, insurance companies, all of us more regulated industries are really feeling the need to keep up with Facebook. For goodness sakes, how can we do that? But that's the reality of the situation today. We know that there's a high penetration of internet usage in Canada. Some of those stats are contained in the report. But one of the things that kind of jumps out at me is there's a surprisingly high number of people who do online banking. And that's currently sitting about 88%. So 88% of people are trusting their bank. We're pretty sure that 88% could probably trust and will trust government as well. So this is an example of that. Depositing the check. So you figure, you think back, it wasn't that long ago that you had to go into the bank branch. You had to see a teller to get your cash, to deposit your checks, to do any kind of business. The banks, they got smart. They saw that things were changing. So what they did is they went through and they just redid all of their back-end processes and they digitized them. And through that digitization, they were able to start offering the different services that their customers were starting to demand. And that's where we saw the ATMs come along. And now you could do your business. You didn't have to go to the branch. You could actually go deposit your check at 3 in the morning if that's what you really wanted to do. And that worked out really well. But the banks didn't stop there. They really carried on. And they continued to upgrade their processes, re-digitize things, make it more available, so that now you can quite literally take a photo of your check and it's deposited right there. So again, you know, it's all about the reason for emphasizing this one. You know, most of you are probably part of the 88%. I'm sure there's a couple here who might be part of the 12, or at least one anyway. But it's all about digitizing the processes, recognizing that your customers are looking for something different, and how can you make it so. So I did mention that 88% and the 12%. We do have to acknowledge there is that 12% who are not moving forward with technology. And especially as government, we know and we recognize that that's our obligation to continue to deliver services for them. So we can't be like Amazon and say it's online or nothing. We can't do that. Yeah.
Is there a number where that goes away? I mean, if we get down to 5% not embracing technology, at what point do you say we need to move on?
So, interesting question. I don't think we know that yet. I think as government, we tend to feel an obligation to serve all the people. There are always going to, not always, but at least in our generation perhaps, there will always be the people who are not going to trust technology. And as local government, really it is our responsibility to deliver services to everybody who lives and pays taxes in the community.
Well, before Shane responds, I'm thinking of things like banks and phone companies and lexicon and, you know, the utility companies. At some point they're going to get rid of paper statements completely. So there must be that, once they get below a certain percentage, they're going to say that's it. I just wondered if that was established. Shane, you?
I think it, further to what Susan's saying, obviously every business is different, private is different than public. But in the case of what you're asking, Mr. Mayor, is it's really up to council as to what you determine is the appropriate number. At what point do we say, okay, it's costing us too much money to be servicing the 5%, it's time to move forward. And there are examples in municipal government at different levels where they have taken a hard line and said, no, this is it, this is how we are going to do business based on the population that they're serving or what's left of the population that's demanding that different type of service. So I don't think you can actually put a number on it. I think it would be incumbent upon staff to maybe continue to monitor it and let you know what the service requirements are and bring forward recommendations in the future.
It's not just the monetary side, it's the environmental side, for instance. I mean, producing the paper, like we had the argument over the council newsletter, where a percentage of the population still goes to the paper for their information. They're not using the website. Okay, that's fine, but at what point does that cost and that environmental factor kick in? That's all. So.
But every to my point, every council is different. Every municipality, every type of government is different. It's up to this council to determine based on the stats that we can show you. It's based on what you want to do as a council.
Okay, thank you.
There's one very real example too I can suggest for consideration, and that's the direct deposit of pay. You know, not that long ago, everybody, you got a check and you deposited your checks and you deposit your pay, and then that turned to direct deposit. And even as local government, we wanted to do direct deposit, but most didn't force everybody to take that. They still acknowledged that there was some people who they weren't doing online banking, or their bank couldn't do it, or they were saving their money in their sock drawer, whatever type of thing. So they continued to give them their checks until those people left, and then anybody new coming on had to do a direct deposit online paycheck. So we'll see, right?
Yeah. So the 12%, so we don't you know, we always talk about how they are not acknowledging new technology, new technology. Do we ever do any studies, or is there anything done on the affordability for families? Because that is a big issue with people who are living, you know, you could have both parents of a family of four working, but making, you know, minimum wage and living below the poverty line. So it's keeping up with the technology that's the challenge. And yeah, everybody has a phone, but there's a cost associated with that too. So are there studies that look at that?
Yeah, there absolutely are, and that's a big part of certainly moving forward with digital strategies. So the kind of the next level of strategic plan, if you will.
Right.
As we go through a digital transformation, we really have to make sure that all of our customers, residents, businesses, whatever, not only can use the technology but have access to it whenever they need it. So we see a lot of government, you know, we're providing free Wi-Fi at our public facilities. The libraries are offering free Wi-Fi and access to devices and that. There are municipalities across Canada, there's a few that we can mention that actually offer devices for loan through their libraries or through their municipal offices and training programs and that sort of thing. So that all becomes that decision for council to make as they move forward. If they want to dive really deep and move forward with digital transformation or digital service delivery, how do they make sure that those people who do not have access to it can have access to it? It's a big deal.
Well, that's interesting because it perpetuates a certain mindset where, you know, you're homeless and you have a phone, but people don't realize that part of the program that maybe the region offers or somebody else offers actually gives them a phone because it's the only way they can keep contact.
One of the interesting things is, this is definitely a passion of mine, is internet for people who don't have it, and it's something that I've been really focused on. One of the interesting things is we have found that providing Wi-Fi in the public facilities, homeless people have greater access to services because they have a phone that's been given to them from somewhere using municipal Wi-Fi. You can't apply for employment insurance without filling out the online form. You can't find a job without going online. So how do we make sure that we can do it? But yeah, you're right. So there's quite a bit of studies on it.
And grants. It's like everything.
Yes.
Thank you.
So what we're really talking about here is in getting common systems into place that can be used by everybody. So what we don't want is one system that, for example, council can see a set of data or information. We don't want another system that the customer service agents can see or that the planning department can see versus the finance department. We want a customer to be able to either come to town hall to the counter, ask for information, phone in, do it through AppJax, do it through anyway, and they get the exact same information. It's consistent, it's timely, and it's what they need right then and there. And this is the goal that everybody is moving towards right now. No longer the disparate systems that are siloed. It's about having them all together, as Nicole mentioned earlier, integrated so that we have the exact same data, we can rely on that data. Currently, we do, though, in Ajax, there's a few challenges with this, and so that's what the next few slides are going to be about. So right now, we've taken a look at the IT department. We often use this pyramid as a way of just sharing the information of what we're finding. And we have, right at the bottom, the IT department is a solid utility, we call it. So they're keeping the lights on. You know, you turn your computer on and it works, you pick up your phone, you get a dial tone, you can do the basic things, and that's all well and good. Moving up, they become that trusted supplier, so they're starting to deliver more critical functionality and services to you. You know that your business solutions are working, the data you can rely on, you can ask for them for some assistance and you might get it. And then up to the top is where IT is really the partner player. They're integral to how we do business. So they're actually partnering with you in solving your business problems. So whether it's one of the business departments or council or whoever, they can go to your IT department and say, I've got this problem, I'm pretty sure there's a technological solution out there, or maybe there's not. Can you help me figure it out and help me solve it? And that's where we really want to go. Right now in Ajax, it's the solid utility. You can depend on the computers working, you're getting your services, things are going okay. Some of the key issues that we observed, Nicole mentioned earlier all the things that we had done. So we did have all the group meetings, we did have interviews, and this is what we found out through each of these. There are gaps in security. There's a lot of gaps in policies and documentation. I did want to make note here, progress is underway. I'm very impressed with staff that they didn't just sit back and wait for a council endorsement of this report. They started acting on things right away. We noted that a lot of the core business solutions are not getting the attention that they need. There's a number of best-of-breed solutions in place, but they're not being leveraged, they're not being maintained, and they're not being used as well as they could be. The lack of integration between the systems, so that results in a lot of data duplication, a lot of redundancies, and not being able to take full advantage of the different solutions and information that's available. And we have some gaps in the customer-facing online services. So there's a number of things that customers might be able to do online with other municipalities that they can't do here in HX. The IT services and management practices. So this is how the IT department runs itself, if you will. We have recognized that IT governance requires change. It's no longer appropriate for the IT manager themselves to make decisions about what projects move forward. IT and technology really is a corporate function now, and we see that it needs to be part of the corporate decision making. To ask the IT manager to make the decision on whether the new building permit system goes forward or the new financial system goes forward is not fair, because they'll pick the easiest as opposed to what's most appropriate. And I say that I am an IT person, that has been my entire career, so I'll make fun of me too. That's what we do. The other thing we've really noted, the demand for technology way outweighs the supply of resources and funds to implement right now. The town, we'll get into it in a few other slides, but the town is significantly under-resourced IT compared to its peers. And that's proving to be quite a challenge now for them and for the rest of the organization to try and move forward. We did a survey.
Sorry, very quickly.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't mention security of our overall IT infrastructure as a key observation. So based on your observation, are we a pretty secure municipality?
So I just went really high level. There are gaps in security. There were, you know what? There's a number of places where the security was quite strong, but there's a lot of gaps as well. So we did highlight it. One of my colleagues on the project is a security specialist, and he was in early on. We identified several areas of concern, and I'm super impressed with the town. Right away, they decided they put resources to it, and they are working towards it. They've done, I don't know exactly where you are with everything, Nicole, but the business impact analysis, finding out where everything is. They've identified where there are some gaps that could be fixed and what needs to be done. So they are working.
Because ultimately, from a cost or even like a public relations point of view, that's where you get the biggest hit fastest is through vulnerabilities in the security network, right? So absolutely. I'm glad we.
Yes, they jumped right on it. It was really good.
Yeah,
Great,
so I can just tell you, after when we saw that initial assessment of where the gaps were, we had a meeting immediately with the security experts in the Perry group, and we took away probably 8 or 9 action items from that, and I'm pleased to report we've actioned every single one of them.
Great.
Some of them are gonna take a few months to get in place, but I mean, it's not to say that we are bulletproof or anything like that, nobody ever is, but we've addressed everything that we can to date, and we continue to work on those things. So.
Thank you.
So we did do a survey that was distributed to all staff. We got over 200 responses to it. There's a lot of details. The full details have been provided to SMT, the project team, and that. So I've just got a couple slides here for you. So when we asked, one of the questions we asked was about the pace of technology change, and you know, that was really asking staff, are you getting things fast enough? Are things changing enough? Are you getting what you need? And over just 35% of respondents were actually satisfied with the rate of change. They really want more, and they know that their customers want more. We asked about the overall satisfaction with the IT department. This is a low number, just 61% were actually satisfied with IT. I do want to emphasize that there was a lot of comments about the team, like they're very responsive, they do get back to me, but I recognize the limited resources that they have. I recognize that they don't have the capacity. A lot of people were telling us that they just don't bother asking IT because they know they can't get to it, and that's a problem as well. So this is a diagram that's just showing how we really assess the current situation of the technologies at the town. And we really start from the bottom and things build up. And I've got a couple of diagrams to show you this. We need to emphasize here really that corporate or enterprise technology is a bit different than the technology used at home. That's one of the challenges facing IT departments right now. Everybody's got Wi-Fi networks at home. They know how to add different devices to their network. But when you get into this enterprise environment where there's major business solutions, it does have a level of complexity that is not the same as what's at small shops or at home networks. But we focus on this area here. So the technology infrastructure layer down at the bottom. This is all the facilities, the network devices, the servers, the security, the disaster recovery planning, all of that sort of stuff. Without that in place, it's really hard to move up to the next layer. So the next layer is the business solution. So this is where the applications and the data starts residing. So, you know, you could have one-off solutions, so single, you know, HR just working with itself, payroll just working with itself. But moving up to the next layer is where they start getting integrated. So you have shared data. So you have that single source of accurate data. And then finally at the top is the customer-facing layer. So this is where your e-services come in, having chat lines available, different apps and that sort of thing available. The emphasis here is the need to build from the bottom up. Too often we see organizations trying to slip right into the top layer there and start delivering all sorts of apps. But the challenge is if you don't have the foundational pieces in place, they're simply not going to work. It's like one of the things I would say for Ajax is the emails that your residents send to you. It's only an email. Even if it's through Ajax, it's really only an email. So it's not fully built into any back-end system, so there's not true tracking of the issues. If we wanted to see if there's anything trending, you don't have that kind of data available because it doesn't have any of the foundational pieces in place. And that's the problem with it. Yeah, it's very cool because people can quickly go to Ajax and they can see information, but it doesn't have those foundational pieces. So we really do want to grow on it.
Do you mind if I jump in here for a sec? I just want to say that Ajax, which the mayor just brought up, is a really perfect example of this. So it's an example of where we kind of jumped to that level 4 and introduced a customer-facing piece without having the foundation. So things that come, like Ajax is a great tool, the residents find it to be a great tool, but the inputs from it don't feed into anything. We don't have a customer relationship management thing where we're tracking those requests or residents can easily and in an automated way get updates. So, and I don't want to steal your thunder because I know you're going to get into this more, but I really need to do my kind of expectation management thing here and just stress that a lot of those pieces that I think are of most interest to council are up in that level 4, those customer-facing pieces, the kind of sexier pieces. It will take us some time to get to those, and we can't do them well until we've got the foundation in place, which is less exciting and still requires a lot of dollar investment. So
Understood.
So looking at those layers, we did an evaluation. There's a whole lot more details behind this, of course, so this is just a high-level summary for you. The customer-facing layer, that top layer, like Nicole just said, we've rated it kind of like a B. There's improvements to be made, but there's some pieces in place. The website's not too bad. People seem to like it enough. There are enhancements to be made, certainly. There's social media. It's managed outside of IT. We've identified further on in the strategic plan about doing a digital strategy to identify those digital services, needs, and priorities. And we also recognize that don't really have a customer relationship management system or strategy to really define what the end user, your customers really want to see by way of services. But there's opportunities here. You know, at least you do have the website. At least you are using social media. We'd like to see it tied in a little bit more to back-end systems, but it's something to build on. When it comes to integration, the data standards and governance, it's at risk right now. There is very, very little integration going on. That just means there's a lot of data duplication. There is redundancy in the systems. There's a lot of workarounds. So people are using, you know, their piece of paper or Excel spreadsheet or something to gather the data to really work, and then, oh, I better put it into the system so that it's kind of tracked in some way. And that's not what you want to see happening. The business solutions, we've ranked that really as a C or quite weak. It's interesting because Ajax has a number of best-of-breed business solutions in place. You've got the best out there. You're just not using them. Or you're not using them much. They've been implemented, a small piece of it's being used where this great big other area of opportunity is not being looked at yet. Costs a lot of money to do that. It's not efficient. You're not getting full use of the solutions. Finally, the infrastructure, we found it was in relatively good shape. So the bones of it, as we would expect, were fairly solid. So the network core infrastructure, the connections to the different facilities was in place. The servers are of a good value, and that sort of thing. But you're missing everything. Everything else is kind of missing in that area. So there aren't standard operating procedures. There aren't policies in place. They don't really have the opportunity to identify performance issues. If they get a chance to look at the logs to find that there's a gap or even a security risk or something like that, they just haven't had the time to look at it. So that becomes that bigger risk. So this here, it's a busy diagram, but it's a very visual one that we use quite often just to show the overall picture. So this is Ajax. So you see the number of greens in the bottom layer, like I've been talking about the infrastructure layer. There's, you've got decent desktops, the tablets are fine, your smartphones are pretty good. The middle layer, that business systems, there's a lot of concerns there. Some of these concerns too are that versions are just out of date. So they were able to buy these systems, but they never had the money to be able to upgrade them to current versions. So now it starts to become, you're almost at ground zero again, and you're gonna have to reinvest. The big white areas there, the gaps in the integration and the customer relationship management, of course, and up on the customer-facing systems, and that's just a gap.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody took a good look at this chart, because this chart is a visual demonstration of where we are today as far as our technology needs. So only the green is good. That's the story. Only the green is good. White is a gap. Red is a risk. Yellow is existing solution, but work needed to improve it. And the orange is existing solution to be replaced. So only the green is good, and that's how far behind we are. Okay?
Thank you.
So pleasant.
Huh?
So pleasant.
Thanks for that.
No, it's
Yeah.
not pleasant. It's not pleasant.
I'm
That,
feeling
to me, that is the best slide that was presented to SMT, and that I think you need to really look at. And as Susan talked about, like your systems are built from the bottom up, and the bottom doesn't look any better than the up, so if not worse.
So who would give us a municipality that's green, that has mostly green in your experience?
Toronto.
Oh, God, no. Oakville, I would put up there.
Oakville?
Yeah. Burlington's another. Kitchener would be one for sure.
Didn't Burlington get-
Burlington, they just got.
They got half, didn't they?
Yeah, but they dealt with it, yeah.
That's why
But
it's
the rest of it
update.
was
We're all good.
So to that question, Councillor Bauer, the municipalities that Susan just named, Oakville, Kitchener, she's gonna have a future slide that talks about how those municipalities staff their IT departments, and I think you'll see alignment between that and the resource investment that they're making.
Wow.
Chair?
Wow.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it's important for me to say that this is a consistent story that I've been saying since I started here. Everywhere that we've looked at, every rock that I've turned over, there are significant gaps because of the lack of investment. In this case, as Susan says, a lot of our software that has been purchased is best of breed because it was a capital purchase. To be totally blunt, didn't affect the tax rate. It was easier to get through capital budget than it is operating. But you need the operating funds to resource and implement the systems properly. And a number of the things that you're seeing here as far as governance and so on, these are operating costs that the previous culture continually squashed, did not want to ask for resources through the operating budget. So what you're seeing is we've got great product, but it hasn't been implemented fully, or it hasn't been used fully because we haven't asked for the proper resources in the operating budgets too.
And if those resources were asked to pass those, you're typically denied, right?
But to be fair to council, it was denied at the senior management table.
Yes.
Most of the asks never got to you.
So this certainly identifies areas of opportunity, and we did certainly focus on that in the strategic plan. The IT investment, just further to what Shane was just saying, we have this chart here, and you'll just see we have our suggested range for IT staffing as a percentage of the total. Usually we see it's between 2.5% to 5%. Gartner, they recommend for government that it's about 3.9 to about 4.2% actually, but Ajax is sitting quite below at just 2.2, and that's a big part of the reason for the challenges. And then if we look at the operating expenditures, we'll see the same thing. It's significantly below. So, I mean, given that, they've done a decent job of keeping the lights on and being that solid utility. This is the chart that Nicole was referring to. So we do a comparator. I will give the disclaimer here, is it 100% accurate? Probably not, but it's really, really close, and we really did try to narrow down the numbers. Some of the challenges that we do get into are contracts versus like full-time contracts, part-time people, how are they accounted for? So we talked to every one of these. Most of these are some of our clients, so we're able to verify the numbers. But you'll see Ajax is significantly low again. The lowest. The lowest. So Guelph that I mentioned was one of the best. Certainly moving forward with Smart City, digital services. They're well known for that sort of thing. And they're quite high.
A great comparator on that chart is Jackson Whitby. So we are very close in population, but nowhere near as far as investment.
So really what we found, looking at this chart here, Ajax IT, they are in that repeatable stage. So they do have, they are reactive. They're able to try and get things fixed when they're broken. They are improving their incident management, even since we've been talking to them, like Nicole mentioned with the security improvements. But they were doing some tracking of help desk calls. They were addressing needs. They came together as a team when it was needed, that sort of thing. But they were never 100% sure what things they were responsible for, what the vendor was responsible for, versus what the business department themselves were responsible for. So what we want to do, and what this strat plan will do, is move them up further along in this chart. And that's where we really want to get to, is that partner player. So how do we do this? We start with governance, and I've talked a lot about governance already here. Key for decision making is having the appropriate governance in place. So the IT managers, they typically do a really excellent job of deciding on the infrastructure. What model of server to get, what size server to get, what kind of switches to get, that sort of thing. But when it comes to prioritizing business solutions, as I mentioned earlier, it's really, really hard for them to do. It's also really hard for them to determine who gets what device. What level of staff gets the new tablets versus what level of staff can't, or what kind of work does the staff do? So IT typically doesn't do a good job of making those kind of decisions. What works extraordinarily well, and has been proven time and time again, is having some form of governance committee who are able to make the decisions from the corporate perspective. What we've recommended and what they've agreed to do is the senior management team is taking on this role. So they are going to be the new governance committee for IT and helping to make all of these corporate decisions. They'll still, the IT department will still make decisions on kind of what kind of server to get and that sort of thing, because you don't want to get into that. You want the technology experts to be doing that. IT will still be making a lot of recommendations for moving forward and what's needed, but it will be up to this governance committee making the decisions. And then the interesting part about this governance committee is now they're helping to make the decisions for what goes forward with budget. So it's no longer up to a single department leader, it's the corporation as staff coming forward to council with these budget decisions, budget asks. We're also looking at changing the way we actually resource projects. So this is just a couple of nifty little diagrams here, but really what it's showing is that we're augmenting our internal full-time staff. We want to leverage our vendor partnerships more. Oftentimes we buy these business solutions, there is some kind of support with the vendors. We want to make sure that we're taking full advantage of that. We want to be able to contract staff as needed. One of the things we've recommended is if we're doing a major capital project, that within that capital budget there's some funding available for resourcing staff, whether it's backfilling full-time staff or bringing in that high-priced expert that you need just for that short duration to be able to do it. We also strongly recommend the use of vendor of records. So have somebody that you can call in on call, basically. So almost like if you consider security, it's one of the best examples to give. You're managing your security, everything's going okay, but you've got a problem. Now do I have to do an RFQ process? Do I have to do an RFP process? And I'm going to wait 6 weeks before, you don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to call that person and have that expert coming in. And leveraging service providers. So, for example, again, I'll pick on security. There's a lot of companies out there who have very expensive, high-skilled talent in around security. You can't afford to have them on staff, so you hire these companies, and they do your security management for you. They check your logs, and they make the recommendation on changes and fixes and that sort of thing. We also strongly recommend that the business partners with IT, and that's what that little circle diagram is there. IT can no longer be putting in the systems and solutions based on what they think you need. It's much better when the business partners with them and make it clear of what's required. And that truly aligns with the business. And again, the senior leadership team have agreed to that sort of commitment moving forward.
So, just for clarity, you say business unit through the town?
Business unit of the town, yes.
So departments?
Yeah. So some of the things we're asking for moving forward is we're really looking to invest in IT. There's a lot of things that have to change. We're looking to change the IT manager role to become much more strategic rather than pretty much a support role. We need this person to be able to be hands-off, not being required to be one of the workers. They need to start thinking more strategically. Looking at a functional reorganization that we'll talk a little bit more about. We want to review the capital funding opportunities. Like I said, how can we better resource some of these projects moving forward? How can we make sure that we're investing in the resources and skills that we need to ensure success? So we've developed a 5-year plan for everything else. So that was kind of the IT organization itself. But we have developed a 5-year plan for implementing all of the other changes that need to be placed. Obviously, it can't be all done at once. So we did go through a number of exercises to prioritize and spread it out over the 5 years. And we also are respecting the budget process. It would certainly be easy for me as the consultant to come and say you have to invest $10 million next year and this is what you need to do. I get it, that's not realistic. So trying to put together a pragmatic, realistic plan that will come forward to council. Obviously, it's subject to the annual budget process and subject to council's approval, but hopefully staff will be able to bring forward these business cases to come forward. But I'm going to stress again, as we've stressed a couple of times here, you really do need to fix the foundational pieces. So the first year is going to be kind of boring. It's going to be that stuff that just needs to get done before we can really start adding some of those new and emerging technologies. Not to say you can't consider Smart City or Internet of Things as we're moving forward. So if you're putting in a new solution, how does it interact with the end customer? Let's look at that now from the beginning, but make sure that the right pieces are in place for moving in.
I have a question. So in regards to our current investment in this, when I go to my phone and I type in IT, I see 6 names that come up in our directory that say LIS IT. I don't have to say their names, but. So is that right that we right now have 6 employees that deal with and work within IT?
No, we have 12.
12. 12 employees currently. Okay, thank you.
Maybe 13. It's either 12 or 13. I think it was 12 when you filled in that chart, and then
Yeah,
we
the
had-
chart, I think.
Yeah.
You have the one big, right?
We did get one position in 2019, so it may be 13.
Okay, so the first stage in 2020 through 2021, we're looking at building the new team, like I said. We are focusing on the IT relationship management, improving that cooperation and collaboration between the business departments and IT. So we really want them to get to be talking to understand what the issues are, what the business challenges are, what needs to be done. Establish the foundations for that more modern work environment. And conduct some of the more strategic assessments and business cases around some of the key topics. So before we move forward, we really have to define what is it we want out of a customer service solution, for example. How are we going to address cloud? There's a lot of cloud solutions out there. Everybody sells them that no impact on your IT department. Well, there is impact on your IT department. There absolutely is. Plus, you want the data. You don't want to be losing that data that's out there in the cloud. You want it to be able to interact with other systems that might be in place. In the first few years, we want to implement the service management improvements so that people know what they're going to be getting from their IT department. They understand when they're getting their new devices. They understand when they can call for help, whether they can call, can you call at 2 in the morning for some things? You should be able to call at 2 in the morning for some things, but certainly not to get your printer fixed. You know, it's that sort of thing. We've identified a number of quick win projects to really demonstrate progress and momentum. And then a key part is communicate the new plan. We've got to let everybody know that there's a new IT in town. As soon as it all gets approved. And then following that, this is when we started really process modernization and mobilization projects, we're calling them. So this is getting the technology out to the staff who need it and out to the customers so that they can start accessing it. So there's a number of major business solutions that need significant work on, and won't go into it today, but things like your workforce management, HR systems, and the employee management processes, we've got to move to more online services there. Planning and building, again, you've got a best of breed system in place here. How can we leverage that more fully for staff and for the end customers? Asset and work management processes, and we really want to see mobile enablement. So having staff being able to do the work out in the field when they're on site, rather than collecting information and coming back to town hall to input the information, that sort of thing. Let's do it right then and there. Build on the customer relationship, customer service strategy, and build that integration back into the back end systems. Build on the modern collaboration capabilities that you have in moving towards Office 365. This is one of the key features. There's a lot of neat things in there that will really help staff to collaborate better and to share their information more readily. And then we really do need to focus on the integration of business solutions. There's a lot of systems out there that are not integrated, for example, into the finance system, and that's a big gap, and that's a risk, and there's a lot of efficiencies to be found. So you see, this is really a key piece for getting all of these bits and pieces more solid and together so that we can start moving forward. And then moving forward in the last couple of years, this is where we really get into the continuous improvement on it. So now we've got the foundations in place. How do we start delivering the next level? So getting into analytics, the visualization of the data, enabling online permitting. You know, let's have a customer can apply online for their permit, and actually the entire process is online and they can see it. And the customer is everybody from the person trying to build a fence in their backyard to your major developers who are doing things. They want to be able to track how their permit applications are going. I just recently held a public workshop for another client and with the business community, and heard from a number of the major developers in the small community about the information that they want, and they totally want to be able to see everything online because their work is all online now. And then when they come to their respective municipality and everything's paper driven, it's a real burden on them, and it adds to their costs, adds to the end client's costs. Looking at online licensing and really expanding all the online forms and payments, letting customers pay however they want to pay when they're accessing municipal services. Right now, it's really hard for a lot of customers to pay, even with a credit card, for some services here in Ajax. What about the person who's coming and wanting to do Apple Pay or something like that? Like, that's just not a possibility here.
So for internal customers, as in our staffing, I understand that there's gaps between communication between departments. So for instance, operation books a massive baseball tournament. Like, ideally, economic development should be sending that out to all the hotels and everything to say, you know, heads up, all the restaurants possibly put on specials that week. Like, we don't have that currently, where there's, like, this starts here, but then it goes here, here, here. Is that addressed in this at all, or like, I understand the external customers, but I think internally too, we need to do better at communicating.
Yeah, exactly, and that's really what the previous slide was about, like getting the collaboration opportunities available.
So that's in 21?
Yeah, starting to build next year, really.
So I think a great example actually is the lack of integration between HR and a number of different areas, HR and payroll, for instance.
Yeah, in the time that I've been here, I've noticed a huge gap in terms of the integration where payroll is completely separate from HR. So we have a number of different systems that we have to use in order to keep track of things. And even at that, it's very difficult to extricate all of that information. So something as simple as how many part-time employees we have, we don't know.
Oh, now you opened up the door.
Oh.
How do you track part-time hour, like, how do you track that? Like, I don't think we have anything that's IT-ish, that even, how do you know the accuracy?
Anything IT-ish would be good.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying that could be an opportunity where we're actually losing money.
Absolutely.
Because it's not being tracked accurately.
It's a risk, it's
It's
absolutely.
a huge risk,
It's a
right?
huge security
And it
risk.
crosses over many departments,
Yeah.
like recreation operations, like many departments.
Yeah.
And how much money are we actually losing not being able to track it properly, right?
Exactly.
Is
and
it
we don't
manual?
know. We don't
I don't even know. Is it manual?
Well, it's being sourced from different information. So, for instance, in recreation, they have all of their part-time employees. All of that information is being sent to payroll through those supervisors, right? Anyone who's, so
Yeah,
Tracy can speak to.
So, the supervisors work with the employees to fill out a pay sheet, so depending on the ability of that employee to do that, sometimes that's more hands-on with some of our older
Some are more
instructors, for
administrative than
example.
others, yeah.
Then all of that needs to be uploaded into a document to be sent, over to be paid. So there's lots of manual inputs in that process that certainly, from a staff perspective is quite concerning. It's time intensive. There's lots of opportunity for error. There's not an ability, as Mary Lou was saying, to extrapolate the kinds of information or track things that HR or departments would like to do in a meaningful way.
Or verify, actually,
Yes,
some of the
yeah.
information that's being sent forward.
Mhm.
There's no way to really verify whether or not, is this the correct pay rate?
Yeah.
Is this, so there are a lot of gaps that we're unable to manage because of the, sheer volume of staff that we have.
But again, further to my previous points, these are things that are very common in municipalities these days. Like we are so far behind where we should be. It's ridiculous, really.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
So we think by, addressing all of these issues, it's going to start to move Ajax forward. As Shane just said, for such a progressive municipality, you really are quite far behind in your use of technology. And we'd really like to see you be able to leverage it more to be able to deliver the efficiencies that one can expect and get staff working at the optimal levels that they should be. And moving up this chart up to that well-managed, even moving towards the more optimized environment, but at least well-managed at this stage. So the strategic plan has identified 4 areas of focus because there's a lot to be done and there's always opportunities for new things to come along. Let's face it, the days of being able to plan 3 to 4 years in advance for technology are long gone. We can talk about one thing today and next week there's a new announcement of something that's completely different. So the plan really does need to be flexible enough to be able to adapt to that. So that's why we really identify these areas of focus, and the projects have all been identified to fit into these target areas. So if something does come up, staff are encouraged to really identify if it fits into one of these areas first. And then if it doesn't, then have the conversation with the governance committee to make sure that it's something that still should be done. So to get into a bit of details here, so the Elevate IT, we've already talked about this. These are the foundations needed to enable that growth. These are coming into the specific house to accomplish the overall goals. So establish that IT governance, put into place some clear policies. We've given a lot of examples to the town. Have an improved project methodology and priority setting so that it's clear how some priorities move forward and some do not, so people fully understand that. Enhance the cybersecurity. That's a daily effort, certainly not something that can be done once and forgotten. And start to build that new IT team. So don't give the staff the opportunity to do what they know needs to be done and start moving forward with that. Let them grow. Don't keep them in the spots that they've had to be kept up to now. Moving forward, the digital workforce and the workplace. So we've talked about that, the Office 365, the new employee collaboration space and technologies that enables online web meetings, video meetings, all of that sort of stuff, and the easier sharing of documents. Sure, it's not just a flip of the switch and it's on, there's work to be done here. So with that work comes the commitment for the implementation support and training. Enable the more flexible mobile and remote working environments. This is what the staff are looking for now. As you're hiring new people coming on board, they expect to have this kind of technology. My daughter, she's 25 years old, just started with a new company, and she was floored when they said that she had to use a separate phone. And she's like, no, I have a phone, I only want to use this phone. And how do they accommodate that? They expect to be able to work from home if that's convenient. They expect to be able to work at 11 o'clock at night because that works for them. And how does the town grow now to meet those kind of needs, that changing workforce that's coming into place that I'm sure you've been hearing about? I want to see more modernized telephony. So the telephone systems, again, you know, I walk in with my cell phone, I put that down, and I pick up my landline and start doing calls. No, not at all. It should all be integrated, that I can see everything that's coming through my landline on my cell phone, or better yet, on my tablet. And I don't even have to pick up that land phone. Maybe we can get rid of that desk phone and no longer use it anymore because we don't need it. Enhanced access to digital tools. GIS, you have a really strong GIS service here. I was gonna say team, but you know, it's kind of down to a couple, but I guess you're building it back up again. There's 3 now, okay, back up to 3. It's quite strong, but it's very limited in its outreach, so we want to build on that. A lot of people are looking for more. And you have your innovation team. So we really like to encourage, especially if the municipality has recognized that they need some kind of innovation team, to leverage those people, that knowledge, because they're the ones who are really going to help make change happen. And of course, the other key focus area is leveraging the technology. This is almost a duplicate of the previous slide, so I won't go into it too much, but again, I'll just emphasize, you've got a lot of really good solutions here. Let's figure out how to use them better and fully leverage what's made available to you, because there's a lot of money sitting there in software, and so there's better ways of using them. And then digital customer service, that's the other focus area. So it's really recognizing what those end customers need and what they really want. And it's about delivering services and new solutions that meet their requirements, not our requirements. So let's not build the online building permitting solution based on what we need it to be. Talk to the end customer and figure out what they need and build it for that, because we can always translate that once we get into these back-end solutions that will be solid and ready to go. Want to say, you know, work is underway. Nicole mentioned this briefly, so that's really good news. Staff have not been just sitting there waiting. The security enhancements, like I said, they're working on it, working on the disaster recovery business impact analysis. That's an entire project that's going to take some time. Working on building the new team. Like I said, senior management have decided that they will be the steering committee, and so they're putting that into place. And I know that Nicole has started to work on the communications plan, how to tell everybody that there is this new department out there. And we also recommend in the strategic plan that they track progress. So it's not just a matter of us coming in here and saying, this is what you need to do. We would like to hold SMT and Counsel somewhat accountable for making sure that all this is actually being delivered. And the way that you can do that is by getting the progress reports. So we've recommended that they identify the IT and the business departments as they move forward on these projects, clearly define what makes success for these projects, and then report on that. There will be regular reviews with the steering committee, and we're also recommending an annual report to Council on the projects and on the implementation of this strategy. So looking forward, towards the latter year of this strategy and then beyond, we're talking about digital strategy, business intelligence, getting into that, so how can we use the data to really make decisions, looking at Internet of Things, the platforms, how in smart city projects, so how can we get into sensors, devices, all of that sort of thing, and planning of 5G. So we do believe that really by building the foundations, and I think with the support of senior management that is clearly evident around the table, and hopefully by Council, that Ajax is going to start working towards developing this next level of digital strategy, and will become that smart city that I think, well, I know what I heard from Council you want it to be. And so to end this is actually the vision statement that has been developed for IT moving forward, to be a leader, an innovator, and a trusted partner in the use of technology for municipal service delivery. I think that's really strong and very powerful statement, and hopefully they can achieve that. In short.
It's not so much. It's not like ours.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do we have any further questions? Yes, we do. Regional Councillor Dice.
Not a question, I just want to thank you for the work you've done on this, and your report was very thorough. I particularly like the examples you gave us. We're not always IT savvy on everything, where Kevin goes through the process with the department. And then I go like, yeah, that's right, that's right, that's right. See, it was easier and helpful to identify those gaps. I'm really looking forward to getting rid of my 5,536 emails because they come into So it's very exciting, actually. There's a lot of things you can do in tracking, in particular infrastructure, I would assume. It's going to be very helpful in risk assessment down the way, and better, putting the dollars aside for those areas and at risk. It's everything. Yeah, there's so many possibilities. possibilities. It's exciting to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan Chase. We can move out of this now. Can I get a mover to come out of this?
Sorry, if I could just interrupt. So there is a recommendation associated with this report.
Okay.
That should be considered an open session. And if I could just take a second to explain it. So as you probably noticed, this isn't a fully costed plan. It's hard to put costs around some of these major initiatives.
Yeah.
What we're looking for today is just the committee's endorsement in principle, and any costed projects, initiatives, positions, et cetera, that arise from it will be brought forward to council as they need to be approved.
I'll move it.
Okay, you're moving, okay. Moved by Councillor Dice. And all those in favor? Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
Excellent report, thank you.
That's what, thanks.
Great information.
We're now gonna move into the closed session part of our GGC meeting.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Bauer,